Hey guys, it's Dr. May. How are you? Okay, so today my topic is called Embrace Your Shadow. Okay, so it's just about the importance of looking at all aspects of ourselves, whether we like them or not, and to work toward healing them so we can become more whole and have a greater sense of inner peace and less sense of inner suffering and dis-ease. Okay, so that's the theme of today. Get this going here. It's coming. My computer's a little slow today, so you got to be patient. All right, here we go. All right, embrace your shadow. All right, so what is our shadow? So as you probably could tell by the picture here, so the shadow is like the dark parts of ourself, so to speak, or something we perceive as dark. And just like in the picture that the shadow is behind the man, the shadow of ourself is often out of our consciousness. It's not something we're willing to look at. It's something that we push behind us, whether consciously or unconsciously, because it might be too painful to face. Okay, so it's the parts of ourselves, like I wrote here, that we consider maybe bad, shameful, or unacceptable, things we don't really like about ourselves, and we all have this, right? So it's very hard to come to a place of self-acceptance and peace if we keep segregating these aspects of ourselves somewhere else and making them bad. Okay, so how do we figure out exactly what that is? Now you might have some sense of what qualities of yourself are included in your shadow. But to further your insight and make it a little bit more clear, these are some fill in the blank sentences you could examine, okay? And you could, pause the video and choose to write these down and fill them out later if you want. You don't have to try to hurry up and answer them this second, but I'll read them out loud to you just so you can begin to contemplate, okay? So something in me I often feel aversion or hatred toward is. The emotion I'm least comfortable expressing is. What I've had a hard time admitting to in arguments is. What I'm most hesitant to express in a relationship is. What I least want others to know about me is. And I don't like admitting that I am. Pretty thought-provoking, right? You can kind of get just some feelings about it first. You may not get the words going, but you might sense a little bit about what this is referring to, right? So we got to dig this up and bring this out into the open so we can work with it better, right? Because let's look at some typical examples of shadow parts, all right? So I'm not sure what came up for you. It may include these things or it might be other things, okay? It's different for everyone because we're individuals. So sometimes part of our shadow is like a rageful part of us that might feel kind of really angry and out of control and uncomfortable to go through that, right? Parts of us that are needy, we may hate the fact that we need some things from people and that we can't just do it ourselves. Parts of us that are vulnerable or scared, especially for males, because males are supposed to be strong, right? And when we feel vulnerable, we feel a little weaker, and it's not always a comfortable feeling. When the childish part of ourselves comes out, it might make us feel bad because we're not being the adult we like to perceive ourselves as being. We also like to feel in control and in the know. So sometimes we feel dumb or foolish and we don't like to admit that, or even arrogant, like we may not like the part of ourselves that, acts like who the heck we think we are and too big for our britches, so to speak, because it doesn't always come across so nice, right? So it might include things like this, but of course, again, it could be other things too. But this is the problem, right? We all have these shadow parts, but there's different ways of relating to them, right? So these are the common ways we might naturally tend to treat these shadow parts, okay? So we might feel real bad about them, so we might try to hide them or pretend we don't see them or run away from them, try to prevent them from having an influence on us in some way. Try to get rid of them however we can. And in the process of doing this, we might engage in certain target behaviors. So you might self-injure, you might, get aggressive toward people, you might use substances or engage in other kind of addictive or compulsive behaviors. And those all serve in a lot of ways to shove our shadow parts aside, okay? Other times we might project them onto other people. You might see these qualities in others and react very strongly to them, but fail to recognize them in yourself. You could also look at my video about projection and idealization for more information about how this works, but it ultimately starts with these shadow parts, okay? You also might attack them, and that could take the form of like negative self-talk and hating those parts and beating ourselves up for even having them in our repertoire, you know? And all that negative self-talk just puts us down and makes it feel a whole lot worse. It compounds the problem, right? And we just layering more shame and self-hatred on top of what already feels uncomfortable. On the other hand, another thing that could happen sometimes is that we might identify with the shadow part and start acting it out. Like, you think I'm so angry and nasty? Well, I'll show you how angry and nasty I really could be. You know, it's kind of like when kids were underserved and, you know, poor or in a low social economic class, don't get a lot of opportunities. And they said, well, you think I'm a bad kid? Well, I'll just show you how bad I really am. You know, and they go out and embrace that identity, you know, and make it even bigger than it has to be. But you're embracing something that might have a lot of negative consequences for you. So that could be part of the issue. But it is a pattern of response that does happen. So in case you do that, just know that, you know, other people do it too. You're not alone. Okay, so here's another twist on it, right? So we still have the shadow parts. And one way of relating is that invalidating critical way of relating, like I just showed in the other slide. However, we can relate to them in a different way. So check this out. So what if we envision them as inner children that came about to protect us, that they developed at times to help us survive painful situations, that they're part of our survival responses that helped us to get through when we were suffering, when we were maybe mistreated or abused or going through something really challenging like a loss. And they're just expressions of what we had to do to survive that situation, right? So let's think about it. So a rage response or a neediness, clingy response, those things happen when we're under a lot of stress, right? So those parts are survival parts that are still within us, right? And so instead of hating them, maybe we could almost thank them because they came about to help us. You know, we may not like the way they show up sometimes, but the intention was to be there to help us get through, okay? And they may only act out, like I wrote on the bottom, because maybe they fear this more trauma, right? They came about to protect us from trauma, and maybe they're always on the lookout for bad stuff happening. And so they get a little out of control when we feel a little threatened because, you know, they're trying to react to it. They're trying to help us in some way, right? It may not be the adult way of what we want to respond, but there's little kids in us are still responding in those old ways, okay? So in a way, it sort of makes sense. So we could validate the fact that they're trying to help us in some way, all right? So keeping that in mind, what if we were to turn toward our shadow instead of running away? So it's like an opposite response. So instead of being like, oh my God, this is so horrible, let's shove it aside. What if I like said, all right, let me see what you got. What do you have to tell me? How could I listen to you? How could I help you? You know, I honor your power. I respect what you're trying to bring to the table here. And I'm sorry you're in so much pain. I'm sorry you suffer so much, but I appreciate you trying to help me. How could I help you now? Is there a way I can make things better for you because you're in so much pain? And respond to them with love and acceptance rather than hatred, right? How would that transform? Like, think about them being like suffering children, and now you're abusing them even more. So what would happen to a suffering child that gets further abuse? They probably would get much sicker, much more traumatized, act out so much more, right? Or what if you had a suffering child and you related to the child this way and you said, I want to listen to you. Tell me what's wrong. How could I help? How could I offer you more compassion? What happens to the suffering child now? Suffering child starts to heal, okay? So what happens in our relationships between us and outside people also happens with the relationships within ourselves and our own different aspects of ourselves, our different parts of self. So just like we respond better when people show us empathy and caring, our inner shadow parts also respond better when we show them empathy and caring. Does that make sense to you guys? Well, I hope so. I wish I could hear your response, but you know, YouTube. So, okay. So always remember that these shadow parts can be transformed. Okay. If we give them that positive, loving, compassionate, empathic response, they start to become something different. They may not be as sensitive and reactive and troublemaking in our lives. They might turn into something healthier. And when we can relate to the different aspects of ourselves with care and empathy and with our eyes wide open and with our arms wide open, we have much more self-integration and less self-fragmentation. And integration leads us to wholeness. And that, of course, is a much healthier way for us to be. And it'll also help eliminate any other outside secondary layers of behaviors and issues that we have. So when we're healed more on the inside through this shadow work, we'll have fewer problem behaviors. We'll have better relationships with outside people. If we could forgive within ourselves, we could get better forgiving other people, right? So everything starts to come together in a healthier way. All right, so this is super important work. And I hope you'll consider it, answer some of those questions, and do it slowly if you have to. Don't overwhelm yourself. But it's really important, okay? This is a really key aspect of your personal healing. And a lot of what therapy is, if you're in therapy, is being able to deal with the parts of ourselves we don't like and embrace them better. And that heals like so much. So I hope you'll try it. All right, thanks everybody. I'll see you next time.